Visit www.flaskup.com for all your Mr. Pandaria raiding guide needs. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10-man normal mode version of Primordius in the Throne of Thunder raid. Now, in order to complete this fight, we use 2 tanks, 3 healers, but you could use 2 at a push, and then the remaining DPS, it could be melee or ranged, it doesn't really make a difference for this fight. So first of all, we're going to take a look at what your tanks need to deal with during this fight. Now, there is quite a lot of damage going on through the fight, so your healers do need to be awake, especially if you do end up taking 2 healers, but again, it's highly recommended you do take 3. So the first ability the tanks need to look out for is called Primordial Strike, and this is a frontal cone ability in a 7-yard cone, and this will inflict 600,000 physical damage. So when this is being cast, you need to make sure that obviously both of your tanks aren't stood in it. You don't want them both taking that damage, it just seems pointless. Just get the one tank to take the damage and be happy with that. The second ability that you have to look out for as a tank is called Malformed Blood, and this is a debuff that will be placed on the player, which will inflict 20,000 nature damage every 3 seconds, and it will also cause your attacks to congeal blood, and this will inflict 20,000 additional nature damage to the living fluids and vicious horrors in the room. And this effect will last for 1 minute and is a stacking debuff / buff. We'll talk a little bit more about the living fluids later on in the fight, but all you need to know when you're tanking is the person that has the debuffs should not be taking the Primordial Strike, and the person that takes the Primordial Strike wants to make sure the boss is facing away from the raid and the other tanks. So now we've taken a look at what the tanks actually have to do in this fight, it's probably best we take a look at what the key elements of the fight are really, and it's based around the living fluids, which I've already mentioned. Now, these living fluids will spawn from around the room, and they will slowly move towards Primordius. They're like little blobs on the floor. They're currently shown on screen at the minute, not very obvious, they're little red things, but these are what your DPS have to kill. Now, before you can actually attack Primordius, you need to gain some buffs from these, otherwise he will take 75% reduced damage from you. In total, you need to get 10 useful buffs from these living fluids before you can actually move on to the boss. So in order to do this, we had our DPS spread out around the room, and you can also get your healers to take these buffs as well if need be. But we got them to spread out around the room, and then each person would have their own little stream of living fluids that they'd have to kill off and gain buffs from. Now, these buffs can be either helpful or deadly, and by deadly I mean not very helpful, they won't actually kill you. But what you should also know is that if a living fluid reaches Primordius, it will increase his current mutation level. Now, his mutation level is like a little energy bar underneath his health. We'll talk a little bit more about Primordius's mutations later on in the guide. So back to the fluids, when your DPS kill them off, that will either cause them to gain a decent buff from a little pool that it will spawn, which is called a mutagenic pool. Now, these helpful buffs can do things such as increasing all your stats by 5%, or increasing your mastery by 10%, or increasing your haste by 10%, or increasing your critical strike chance by 10%. Now, the only time these become harmful mutations is if you receive 5 stacks of a certain buff. So if you receive 5 stacks of any of those buffs, which is very, very, very unlikely in the fight, I can guarantee you that, then it will do the opposite effect, and it will either reduce your stats by 10%, reduce mastery by 20%, reduce haste by 20%, or reduce critical strike by 20%. So you should keep an eye out for that, but at the same time, it's probably nothing to worry about in normal mode. Now, something else you should look out for is a volatile kind of puddle. And these are little purple things that spawn on the ground. Now, these can also spawn from the living fluids. So these will be quite deadly, and they can also mutate Primordius and yourself. Now, if Primordius is to step on the volatile pool, which is a little purple moving thing, then it will increase his current mutation level to its maximum, and it will also heal him for 10% of his maximum health. So obviously you don't want this to happen. Now, these volatile pools actually move ever so slightly. You don't see them move very much, but they do move slowly towards the boss. So in order to deal with this ability, we made sure we were just kiting the boss around the outside of the room at all times during the fight. This also helps to slow down the rate at which the living fluids get to him, and also slow down his mutation level increasing. Now if one of the players is to step on the volatile pool, it will be absorbed and it will inflict 100,000 nature damage, and it will also cause a harmful mutation. Now if a mutated player is dispelled, all the mutations will be removed. That's not something you need to really worry about in normal mode. You should probably worry about it in heroic mode most likely. You don't need to get people to soak them in normal mode unless they are becoming a little bit of a problem, again, which they shouldn't. Now, like I've mentioned, you need 10 full mutations in order to become fully mutated. So this is soaking 10 of the helpful puddles from the living little globules that spawn. Now, when you are fully mutated, you will be able to deal full damage to Primordius, and any more mutations after that point will be harmful. So when you are fully mutated, don't gain any more mutations. There's no need to. So now you know what you need to do with the living fluids. We're going to move on to take a look at the mutations that the boss will gain. Now what you need to bear in mind for these is that the boss will only have 3 mutations on him at any one time during the fight. So there's 6 in total, and you'll only have to deal with half of them, which is a blessing really, considering it's normal mode and not heroic mode, where you probably have to deal with like 20, even though there's 6 in the fight. So his first mutation, fairly easy to manage, is called Ventral Sacs, and this will inflict 20,000 nature damage to every player in the raid every second. This is just something you've got to heal through, unfortunately. It's not that much damage if you think about it, but it can be if it does go on for some time. The second ability is called Gas Bladder, and this will cause him to spray kind of a gas cloud. It's horrible. In a 25-yard radius of the boss, which will inflict 800,000 nature damage. Now this damage will be split evenly between any players that are standing within this 25-yard radius and standing in the green stuff. So what you need to do is make sure that you move in and you share the damage. Otherwise, if you're the only ones in range, if no one's in range of the boss, your tanks are just going to have the damage split between them, and they're already taking too much this fight anyway. His next mutation is called Pathogen Glands, and this is what he will target at a random player, and this is a bastard of an ability, as it will deal 100,000 nature damage every second for 10 seconds. So in total, that player is going to take 1,000,000 damage. Like I say, it's a right bastard, and you just have to heal through it, unfortunately. It's all you can do. His next ability is Metabolic Boost, and this will cause him to use abilities more often, and also increase attack speed by 50%. So this can be a bit of a pain, especially if you get something like Pathogen Glands and Acidic Spines while Metabolic Boost is up, because he's going to be casting those two more frequently, and it's going to put quite a bit of pressure on your healers, to be fair. And his final mutation is called Erupting Pustules. Now again, this one's kind of easy to manage, and what it will do is cause pustules to erupt from him every 10 seconds. Now this will shower a certain area with corrosive blood, and this will inflict 125,000 nature damage within 2 yards of its impact location. It's simple. Don't stack up, but also try to dodge it if you can, because it is a lot of damage. It's 125,000, so if possible, avoid damage. If not, take it and then say, sorry healers, please heal me through this damage. So that is Primordius, the weird looking boss in Throne of Thunder. There are some weirder looking bosses, but we'll move on to them in different guides. So as always, thank you for watching, and if you are interested in future Mr. Pandaria raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.